And I would like to introduce our presenter today, Sue Hellman. Want to make sure that everybody who has entered in is able to get to the Word document that is in the chat. If you have any problems, technical problems, you can direct message me to let me know that you're having issues or if you have questions about that part of it. And then please keep checking the chat. Feel free to post in the chat. Sue, you ready?
Yes, I am. All right, so there is a participant deck. If you're not getting the participant deck, when you first click on it, it'll say make a copy. It's completely safe. Then you should be taken to a deck that looks like this. It doesn't have all the slides that I'm showing, but it has all the activity slides that you're going to, and templates or links to them that you'll want to be able to use. So um, I'm here today to talk to you about ChatGPT, ways that it can be incorporated into courses for use with students, some reasons why, but also ways to try to work around it, outwit it, outsmart it, outplay it, so that it's actually being kind of given a use, but not a use that is counter to the concerns that you have about students using it to submit essays. I'll keep putting, or Deborah and I will keep putting the link to the participant deck in the chat. Deborah's going to monitor the chat for questions, and or you welcome please to unmute and you can reveal yourselves. You can show me your video in the strip. As I was saying when I first started, I'm the kind of person who will mute and unmute, but not reveal myself on video because I tend to watch presentations from my couch and I'm not particularly photogenic when I'm a couch potato. So I totally understand if you don't feel like it, but it's wonderful to be able to see people who are here. So in early November, the world changed forever in academia, I think. We've done this. I see your comment, Dallas. Thanks for that. That I think I'm a math teacher, and we went through this kind of huge, disruptive, major, fearful change years ago when the first tools the first tools that could do math questions for students came online. And all of a sudden, we were asking ourselves, well, if we can't make sure that students are doing their own work in math, what are we going to do next? So educators have tended to react in one of three ways. Denial, often mixed with anger, depression, a sense of loss, a sense of helplessness, and a desire to roll back the clock. Because ChatGPT being on the job, it's kind of your worst nightmare that there's gives students, where are the students in all of this if ChatGPT is doing the work? And there are courses that students can take free or for $20 to show them what to do, how to get better marks on essays. There are actually online courses now and that kind of thing. The second type of reaction was trying to sort of get into kind of a partnership with ChatGPT. And a lot of people have discovered, excuse me, ways in which they can make it more engaging, that they can use it really to make their own lives simpler and by having it plan lessons, create materials at different readability levels, and so forth. And yet I get kind of tangled up in the feeling that there's a bit of a double standard going on, but it's good for me, but I really don't want my students using it. The third, really, these people, I think that this is kind of shifted. It is shifting more and more in what I'm reading at different university websites, is that there's a desire, I think, among a certain group of educators to sort of future-proof their students. Because they know that people are using ChatGPT from everything from looking up medical information in the work world, excuse me, in the work world, people are doing writing with it. And so the feeling is that somehow we have to incorporate ChatGPT into what we're doing so that students are ready to be able to use it in a sophisticated manner when they in real life. So my feeling is strongly that the approach to sort of dealing with the incursions and the fear what ChatGPT can do is to come at it really from a plagiarism ethics and what can we do other than short of shut it down kind of thing, and move the discussion about ChatGPT into your sort of bigger your bigger digital literacy discussion. That somehow that campuses need to be prioritizing a skilled use of ChatGPT and helping students recognize the limitations and potential. In other words, what they can gain and potentially lose what they gain and potentially lose by using it. There's a very early study on the effect of using ChatGPT in professional writing tests. And there's some really interesting results. And I'm just going to pause here for a minute and show you that in your own deck, I'm just going to say, hang on, view, hang on, I want to, if you look at the speaker notes in your deck, there are the references to anything that I've cited. The references are in the speaker deck. And also there are interesting readings, or in the speaker notes, there are interesting readings and I think ideas that I pulled out of the readings. So please, when you have time after the session and you're perusing your own deck, take a look at what's in the speaker notes. I think you'll find it quite interesting. All right, so one of the biggest findings was that it kind of equalized the playing field as far as writing ability between weaker performers or weaker employees and stronger employees. It kind of elevated, it made a greater difference in the life of the people who were not strong writers. And it restructured the tasks. So you could see on the graph that these writing tasks were taking on the whole something about about 60% of the original time, with the amount of time that went into writing the first draft really shortened to about a half. So the greatest amount of effort, sort of proportionally, even though it looks at with AI versus no AI, people are using less time brainstorming. The brainstorming as a piece of the overall task completion time was increased, but the amount of time polishing and editing was also significantly increased. So here we are about 113 days later, and ChatGPT 4 is on the scene. ChatGPT 4 is huge. From what I've read, it works 5 to 8 times faster. This, for those of us who have struggled to read big numbers, 100 trillion parameters. Parameters are explained in the speaker notes for those of you who aren't sure of what that means. And anybody who's coming in late, please check the chat so that you can grab the participant deck, so that, sort of this shows you kind of the relative size, the amount more data. And every time you're working with ChatGPT, you're using response, you're conversing with it, you're having it kind of perfect what it gives you. All that is data that's going into ChatGPT as well to increase its ability to create products that are more human-like, that are more useful. So it's a bit of a double-edged sword. ChatGPT 4 recently, this is the newest one, passed a simulated law school exam, top 10%. Now, if I had been doing this presentation 2 months ago or 3 months ago even, we didn't really have to worry about that much, because it was only scoring in the bottom 10% or the bottom 20 or 25%. Really, in 113 days, it can now pass the major LSAT, the SATs, law school exams, medical school exams, and with the top 10% of test takers, which is huge, and it's just in its infancy compared to what it's going to be able to do. So my question to pose to you to start with is if it's whether you think it's time to open a discussion with students about what constitutes cheating and plagiarism. And this goes back to my point of sort of looking at ChatGPT and kind of thinking about what it can do, the fact that we really can't control what people will do with it, and say to ourselves, maybe there are ways to integrate this into what we're doing so that it's still a useful tool, but it's not going to do for us it's not going to handle assessments for us, which is something that I think is really important. This slide, and it's in your deck, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, gives you some potential ways to integrate ChatGPT into your classroom activities. I think that Think, Pair, Share, and Jigsaws are activities that people use quite a lot. If you've just come into the chat room, or if you've just come into the session, please check the chat room so that you can grab your copy of the participant deck. I think there are some things to think about, that you can give groups ChatGPT generated material to discuss. They can analyze it, they can look for the strengths and weaknesses, and if you give them the criteria for what makes a strong piece, what makes a strong argument, and so forth, that gives them a basis to understand what you're looking for in their own writing. The other thing is, you could consider making ChatGPT a group member in each group. And you can either give students materials that something that you've had ChatGPT prepare as a response to a particular reading or a particular video or whatever resource that you're working with, or the groups can ask it for responses by giving it their own prompts and kind of get its take on a particular issue, on a particular reading, and incorporate that into what they're doing. So it can be kind of used as a partner, as a tutor, and for you to have material. Deborah, if you'll pop the link into the chat for the new arrival, that'd be great. Okay. The third response is to figure out how to make lemonade, and that's where we're going to spend most of our time today. And so the first thing to making lemonade with ChatGPT is to stop making it sound like a person. Is it Robo Sapiens or is it disembodied incomprehension? ChatGPT does not think. It's not a knockdown version of a person. It mimics thoughtfulness and creativity as if it understands without actually being able to think. All it's doing is it's spitting out words, not thoughts. Words. It's working on the basis of probability and word matching. It's popping words out. That's all it's doing. And the algorithms have been adjusted so that instead of getting the top match in its words, so if it has 5 possible words that it can spit out that would be the next word in a sequence, it's not always going to pick the number 1. It's going to pick number 1 or number 2 or sometimes number 3 to make it sound more human, because we don't always pick the best words. All right, so what we're going to do next is, because ChatGPT is so it's not something that we can avoid being with. I think what we have to do is go back to Bloom's taxonomy and think to ourselves, what does it really mean to learn and understand? If ChatGPT mimics learning, it mimics understanding, and those words are often used in the context of that the machine learns, it understands, it can converse, those kinds of things. What does it really mean to learn and understand? And how are students going to be able to demonstrate learning and understanding? I think a lot of times people think of comprehension as a lower order skill on the taxonomy list. But really, if ChatGPT if we sort of rethink that and say lower order skills are the things that ChatGPT can do, It cannot understand. So understanding has to drift to the top of the list. So what I'd like you to do in your participant deck is click on this document, which should take you here. All right, it's a collaborative document, should take you to there. And scroll down to page 2 and start looking at the verbs in the taxonomy list. And what I think we can do is we could strike out, if we strike out anything that ChatGPT can do, we know it can do it. We can't use that to assess learning. We can't use it to assess learning and understanding anymore. The words that we are sure that we can continue to use, bold them or highlight them. And the ones that you're not sure, or they were still useful, they are still useful in the ChatGPT that you can get to, because we can get to 3.5. Unless, 4 is in beta, and it's maybe behind a paywall. Nobody really knows exactly what's going to happen to it. But I want you to think in terms of which ones can we continue to use? Which ones can we not really use anymore to assess with? And which ones do we have some doubt about? If you've just come in, this is the link to the Google Doc, or this is the link to the deck. If you would like the link to the doc, okay, hang on. The link to the Google Doc itself is here. Should be able to get it from there. And let's go in and let's spend about 5-7 minutes really going through the different levels and thinking, what's a lower order skill that ChatGPT can handle? What can it not do? Because I think we have to rethink assessment. All right, everybody okay with that? I see some people there already. Anybody have a question? Please feel free to unmute. We can talk about it as you go along. Okay, so now we want to do is, there we go, strike it out. Good. Okay, strike out anything. That might be a good way to start. Strike out anything that ChatGPT can do, because if ChatGPT can do it, it's really going to be hard for us to assess students' learning and understanding through those kinds of activities. Oh, I like the fact that people are starting in different categories. That's great. Let me zoom down so we can watch.
Are you saying we don't need to teach it or we don't need to assess it? Because students
no,
still need.
I'm a complete believer in fundamentals. What I'm beginning to realize is that ChatGPT can pass the law exam in the top 10 percentile, then we need to find a different way to assess it. Right? It's that we can't use these measures. If we used to be
right, go ahead. But what about the fact that assessment needs to match instruction, and when we have learning objectives, we need to assess each objective. So if one of our objectives is a low-level Bloom activity and we don't assess it in any way, that's problematic in terms of instructional design for learning, correct?
I think in some ways we need to think of that you need to have the information in order to do the higher order activity. That the information, that there is a place where knowing information is extremely important. I completely believe that. And this is something I'm tangling with, that we need to be thinking in terms of the fact that assessment needs to change and how are we going to change it. I don't have all the answers. I'd be interested in hearing from anybody else who has some thoughts on the issue. But I think it's really important to look at something like, for example, compare. If I'm looking in comprehension, one of the ways we used to assess comprehension was by having students compare things. Well, ChatGPT can do that for me just as well. Like if that's the case, Um, excuse me. If that's the case, what happens with compare? Is it something that I can depend on as a way to assess learning? Not necessarily anymore, not necessarily in the same way that we used to. And so, it's I think it's really important to say, if I need to be able to write tests that enable students to demonstrate learning, not just acquisition of information, but understanding of that information. And that somehow I have to start thinking into assessment in a different way. Anybody have something to contribute?
Well, it's me again, if that's okay.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
okay, given what you just said, what about the idea of retrieval practice, on the spot retrieval practice? So sure, go to ChatGPT, learn ABC, whatever they can teach you, but then I'm going to ask you if you can retrieve it.
And you're anticipating exactly where I'm going next.
Oh, sorry.
No, I think it's wonderful. You're heading in exactly the right direction. What we're going to do, and I'm going to show you a kind of a different model for flipping, because I think more and more universities are coming up with the idea of using a flipped model, but they haven't really made a place for ChatGPT inside that model yet. So let me take a look. Let me show you. To the person who just entered, there's the document that you're going to need to copy in the chat. I have a feeling that maybe we should move on. Is that how people are feeling? Can I hear a sort of a general yay or nay?
Yay.
Okay, I'll take one. So my feeling is that instead of something like Bloom as a taxonomy, we can be thinking maybe more in terms of the medicine wheel, where we're coming up with ideas, we're getting information that we need, we're going to test it, we're going to do sort of higher order skills, and that understanding is the outcome. Understanding is no longer a lower order skill. All right, so let's look at Lemonade. Let's talk about what we're going to do to flip the class. And so if we flip the class, how does that begin to look? Let me suggest, okay, I have to come, oops, sorry. Yep. I'm going to slide this back over where it belongs. All right. I need to pop over to show the film strip. Let me suggest something like this. This is in your deck. All right. So if we sort of think of independent time and synchronous time, the sort of the pre-class activities used to be thought of as, developing engagement and introducing a topic. I want you to think, I'm beginning to think of that independent learning time as the learners taking responsibility for content acquisition, and we're going to put a lot more decisions into their hands for what that means. Now, this comes from the last experience that I had when I was teaching the pre-calculus course. And, there I was sort of teaching away, trying to get people to ask questions, but they didn't even know enough about the topic to ask questions. They were just trying to keep up with what I had to say. So what I did is I instead of marking homework and assigning homework, I simply turned it over to them and said, it's your job to try to learn as much about this stuff as you can. It's not going to be perfect because we're going to have class time for other things. But what we're going to do is your job then is this, your homework, your home time, your independent time is to learn how to make this stuff go, learn about what it's about. It's content acquisition. And there are lots of places that you can get information. And what I found that was most interesting was I spent hours looking for videos and creating guided worksheets. And the students were still looking for external sources of material. A lot of people were looking for material in their first language. And this is a place where you can put ChatGPT. This is what it does really well. Instead of having to do an endless Google search for a particular topic in math or a particular question in math or in any other subject, can ask ChatGPT. What can you tell me about this? What do I need to know? What are the main ideas? And you can ask it to knock down the reading level. so that it says to students, use ChatGPT to help you with this content acquisition stage. The synchronous time then moves to exactly as you were saying. Was it Helene who was talking? I'm not sure who was talking because I don't have a full gallery in front of me.
Yes.
Is to say, okay, so my class time is going to be for formative quizzes and corrections. That's what my class time is about. Now, you can move some of that to the independent time by collecting the data ahead of time and coming on. That's why my kind of flipped classroom has a lot of overlap. And it has sort of permeable barriers here because activities can slide from one place to the next depending on your teaching style, your initiative, your content area, and so forth. Instead of delivering a full lecture, we're going to then do micro lectures that are corrective. They clarify difficult concepts. They cover misconceptions, right? The learners then learned to ask questions. They're formulating what they do in their independent time is is develop questions that they want. Here they're developing clarification extension questions. They bring them to class and they ask the questions in class. And in addition to that, then we've got the active participation things that are coming up. This is where you can use ChatGPT generated drafts that students can be looking at and so forth. So that we're going to kind of change. We're putting that retrieval practice, like you said, it can happen independently if you have, interactive quizzes that to work with. But if not, start the class off with a 4-question quiz. Doesn't have to be long, just short. And then, once they've got it, they've turned it in. It can be done electronically. Then you're working on the responses that you got from the previous day. Sterling, I'm going to let you in. This is the link to the Google Doc is in the chat so that you can see it. Brandy. Okay, so that means that we're using that in order to make the strategies that I'm going to show you next work, you're going to need to use scaffolding because here, so we've got this, students need to know how to ask questions, what kind of questions to ask. They need to sort of trust the atmosphere for asking questions. But they also, for the strategies that are coming up here on the strategies choice board, you're going to need to teach them how to use the strategy in a way that has a low cognitive load. And then as they become stronger with that, then they're going to apply that learned strategy to the content that is really important. And so what we're going to do is we're going to get them across Vygotsky's zone of proximal development. Anybody not familiar with the term zone of proximal development? I'm quite happy to explain it. If you haven't heard it, it's a good one to know about. Okay, and I'm past. Oh, and Deborah's way ahead of me getting the link for the presentation slides into the chat, so please feel free. Is everybody familiar with the ZPD? So, okay, and scaffolding. Is there anybody who's not familiar with the term scaffolding? Please indicate by just unmuting, saying yes, or if you'd like me to explain it, please put a note in the chat. I'm watching it as it goes by. I think the point from what I've read, scaffolding in higher ed can be conceived of in a slightly different way from the rest of the world. Often the higher ed thinks it's scaffolding because it gives easier tasks and easier work in first year and more complicated tasks and more complicated work in fourth year. Scaffolding is a little different, my understanding of it. It says that if you're going to teach a new strategy, and this is what we're going to do, we're going to have people working on activities that make their thinking visible, that galvanize collaboration and community, that scaffold critical thinking skills. We're going to have that going on in class. So they're going to be really busy and using a lot of time out of class to acquire content. And what we're going to do with them in class is have them clarify content, demonstrate learning of content, and use content in higher order ways. So to develop learning, to develop understanding, that's what we're going to do. And to do that, when you scaffold, you need to kind of initially minimize cognitive load while they're learning the processes. So you use things like Cinderella stories that are familiar to everybody, concepts that people already know about, so that they can concentrate on using the strategy in a sophisticated way. And then when they know it, that's when you attach the real content to it and have them use a known strategy or a learned strategy to unwrap more content. Okay, so I'm going to give you a few minutes to explore the choice board. These are some activities that I'm recommending that you can use instead of using your class for content, for kind of dealing out content like cards in a deck, for working with the content and using it in a more sophisticated ways. The ones that are in red are slides that are actually in this deck, or the ones that are in color. So the close reading and annotation, the round robin, peer review, critical thinking routines, and graphic organizers, these ones, the National University graphic organizers, are in this deck. The others are the white boxes linked to external websites or other decks, other Google decks with the strategies in there. Almost every one of these has a link like this. Okay, they take you to a link. This one, the link for this will take you to slides in the deck. This will take you to an external link. These links take you to the sources. Here, the fishbone is an external link. The class tools is an external link. Everything else is a little easier. It has only one link per box. So I'm going to give you 5 minutes to take a look, unless you'd like me to walk you through them, in which case I can do that really quickly. If you'd prefer, I'll walk you through some of them. Is there any kind of consensus? Time to explore or walk you through?
I think it's better if you walk us through.
Walk you through? Okay, Efren, I got it. Okay, so let me take you through the ones that are here first of all. All right, close the round robin. The first one that I'm showing is the critical thinking skills. These come from Harvard's Project Zero Critical Thinking Toolbox, and a woman who's a fabulous educator named Caitlin Tucker created graphics that you can use with your class. Either you can have them as a think, pair, share, you can have them as a jigsaw, you can simply put the students in groups and have them fill them in together. They're wonderful, because this is where we're making thinking visible. This is where you can see students, you can listen and see students grappling with the concepts and ideas. If you look above the slide, that's the heading. Below the slide are the links, and often again in the speaker notes, if there's anything extra of interest, it's always worth checking the speaker notes. And that one, there wasn't anything particular, but this is a great deck. Caitlin did, I think, about 8 or 9 of them, but the Project Zero Toolbox is wonderful. And it's a way to get students working on getting into a topic, or at the end of a topic, like an exit ticket, or you can even pick a difficult piece in a topic or something that's controversial in a topic and have them come at it from that direction. The round robin is one that I made up, and I'd be interested in getting some feedback on whether you think it's useful. So the idea is that you would have a reading for the students in the group to work on, or a video or some kind of resource or some kind of an activity. Tasks 1 and 5 are done by the same person. So I do the first impressions. I pass my sheet to the next person who does clarify and understanding, and it goes around, and each different people do different stages, and I get back and I get all this input from other people, and then I can sort of reflect, I can sort of think forward and back. And this is a kind of activity that you could do it over 5 days. So if you want each person to do, different people to do different parts, you can assign them different pieces over 5 days and use it as a sort of an entry activity for your class. Or you could also have each person has a different article, And so I put the first impression on mine, but then when I get yours, I have to sort of clarify understanding for you on your article. And then I get a third article and a fourth and a fifth, and they're sort of related on a particular theme, and you pass it around. The next activity, and if you use these back arrows, they take you back to the slide deck. The next one that is in this particular deck is peer review. Now, peer review is hugely important at higher ed, and people, I think, are really disappointed by the results because they sort of assume because students in high school and they've been doing peer review for a long time, they really have no idea what to do. And they also they really don't have a purpose. For them, peer review is I give you the answers or I tell you that your work was wonderful because I don't want to make you look bad in front of other people in the class. But in the higher ed level, peer review has a huge, it's a big part of career development. And also in the business world, being able to sort of take something to the team. And anybody who's coming late, the link to the participant deck is in the chat. And so what I've done here is you're going to start by establishing the value of peer review in higher ed, and then you're going to scaffold the skills. This is linked to another document that has sort of some introductory material on how to do it, and then there's some choice boards. So you could have different people picking different. If you had groups of 6, you could have each person doing a different one, or you can give students the choice of which prompts they want to respond with, and it follows with a response page. So the idea is we're going to guide people to give useful review information. I kind of elaborated on that by making another version that I thought was maybe a little more suitable for content areas that I had worked with. And then there's even a short version of something that's really fast. Okay, and then the other one that's in this deck comes from the National University Academic Success Center, and these are templates that are designed to be activities that are designed to help students develop better synthesis and analysis skills. And what I did there is I took the activity that was at this link and I created an interactive template for you to use with it. So you don't have to make a template to give to your students. And you would cut away the cover. The cover is because there were a lot of moving pieces on the slide. Is there a way to get to without logging into Google? You know what? That's a really good question. I have Google on everything and I haven't tested it, but the very last slide, let me put my email for you. If you send a note to me directly through the email, I'll figure out a way to make these available to you so that if getting into Google is a serious problem, it might take me a few days to get there, but I will try to make a version in PowerPoint so that I can send them to you directly through PowerPoint. Just send me a note, please, and I'll get back to you. Does that help? Okay, so this is a sort of a transparent cover that's on this page because there are a lot of moving pieces on the page. You're welcome. And the idea is that you would delete, if you once you give it to the students, ask them to delete the transparent page. They would duplicate the slides, they would remove the overlay, and then they can type directly into the boxes. They can type directly into there. Okay, and there are several of them, as you can see: opinion support, issue analysis, defend it against an argument. There are several different ones in there for them to use. Then we come to the one that is right in the center, the reasoning elements wheel. That should actually have a color block on it. The reasoning elements wheel is a really interesting activity because I think it can be used in a number of different ways. Let me take you to the slide. This slide comes directly from this website. And the idea is it gives students a way to either to look at something that somebody else has written, or to think their way into what they're writing themselves. And what I really loved about this is that one of the elements is fairness. And I think very often, particularly in sort of in an increasing polarized society, this idea of what's fairness doesn't always come into things. And what occurred to me was, so that this particular slide would be for students to work on together or individually, or for you to give them notes on what each of these particular pieces means. And if you go to the Critical Thinking website, you actually get an interactive version of this wheel that gives them lots of information on what that means. So here they could make notes to remind themselves that in your context, what does that particular activity mean? Here, then this is one that they could use to actually do sort of do an activity with the wheel, all right? And it sort of struck me that they could use it to analyze a reading, a ChatGPT reading, to analyze a reading that you've given them that is really important, or a piece of it, to think their way into their own topic, or it could be a choice board. The idea is that you could have groups of however many. If you had groups of 4, each person would take 2. All right, and you could do it as a jigsaw, you could do it as a think, pair, share, but the idea is that you could be used in a collaborative way with ChatGPT, again, as one of the partners. You could find out what ChatGPT said about each one of these and throw that into the mix for them. So the whole point here is that what we want students to be able to doing, instead of spending class answering, mastering content acquisition and answering questions and worrying about being right or wrong, you want them to become curious. You want them to ask questions. You want them to cogitate, really, okay? That's the best word that I could put to that. And you want them to conceptualize and develop insight. And if they're doing that in front of you, you can guide the part of the learning process that is the most difficult part. So instead of guiding them through the content, and it doesn't say that you're not going to do it, you are. Because back in the flipped model that I'm proposing, which was here, you're very much there. It's just that you're switching roles. You're giving direct instruction where it's needed. Okay, and that can be to the group as a whole, to small groups. You could pull a group and say, anybody who didn't understand this particular part of the lesson, come over here, I'm going to do a lecture on it. The rest of you can work on something else, so that you can respond to small groups of people who had misunderstandings. You can pick up on the fact that something was a broad misconception. You know where the misconceptions are, where the difficult points are in your content. That you do directly. You don't do the broad, massive stuff. That you put the responsibility on the learner's shoulders, but you also give them some control over deciding how they're going to do it, what they're going to do for it, and so forth. And if they're not getting the results that you want, then you can bring into class a discussion of, well, if you're not getting the results that you wanted, how are you going to change what you do? I'm not going to change what I do by going back to the way we used to do things, because that's not the best way for you to be spending your independent time. The best way for you to spend your independent time is doing the lower order stuff. The best way for you to be spending your in-class time is doing the higher order stuff. The stuff that says, what we're about here is learning to ask better questions. Okay, learning to where to find the resources to answer those questions, and thinking more deeply about what we're doing, and developing insight and developing insight and being able to conceptualize what we're dealing with. And I think I'm 2 minutes from the end. The last slide is how to get hold of me. I do other kinds of workshops, or I'd be happy to sort of work with you individually on a project. I'm retired, so I do, and I've been retired for quite a while. So I'm at the enviable position in my life of being able to do things that are fun. And so, and this is what's fun for me, is sort of thinking in terms of, this is huge. Like I tell you, I have to tell you, if I was teaching a content area other than math, where we've already had to figure out what to do with this sort of huge sea change, you know, talk about climate change. I mean, it's just mind blowing to me what you people are sort of are facing. It's just unbelievable. And I, you know, because, you know, ChatGPT is just in its infancy. It's only going to get better. And so what we have to do is kind of we have to give up trying to control the things that we can't control and try to get it used in a way that's constructive, in a way that's helpful, and then bring the teaching and learning of this stuff that's the most difficult into a place of visibility so that the students aren't burning up the phone lines trying to get help from each other on how to do the stuff that's the most difficult. That's what we're there for. We let them do the stuff that's easier. We're there to help them do the stuff that's more difficult. And that's me. That's 8:50. Questions? I know we're done, Deborah. You put the
Yep.
survey. You put
I
the
put the
survey.
survey in the chat. Please make sure that you complete it. And I'm going to keep recording until we end.
It's Deborah, is somebody going to use this particular room, or can we keep going for a few minutes without
They're
making?
going to use my login, so
Okay, they are going to use
you know,
the
we
same.
probably need to go ahead and leave.
Okay, if anybody has questions. Well, Helene, I hope it was helpful. You're more than welcome to beg, borrow. This is ethical use of somebody else's ideas. The idea isn't any good if it sits with me. It's only good if it goes somewhere, if somebody else uses it. So please feel free. And as I said, please feel free to email me if you'd like to have a conversation. I can Zoom at home, and it's been a real pleasure to be with you this morning. I'm so sorry that I blew yesterday. I'm so sorry. I got mucked up in the time zone discontinuum or whatever you want to call it. You're more than welcome, Veronica. I hope you found it helpful.
I'm going to go ahead and stop recording now. Thank you,
Okay.
everybody, for coming.
You're more